Well, it is October 12th. It's a Saturday night. The wind is blowing, a storm's coming in. Out on the West Coast, there's fires going on, smoke. Somebody on Facebook said it was sort of apocalyptic looking. And I figured, you know what? We can go to bed early. We had a rough week. Everybody's had a rough week. A lot of people are having a rough year. But one of the things that I sat here and I thought, I was like, why do I do? Why would I do a live show tonight? Take a little NyQuil, recover from the week, get a good night's sleep, and I could probably still do that. And then I started thinking, I don't know what's going on. Yeah, I do. But I'm sitting here thinking, you know what? Why do a live stream? Because you're breathing. YouTube has been around for so long, and I've been on here for years, creeping up on a decade off and on stuff, just having some fun with this stuff, that you kind of end up taking it for granted, and you sort of forget how cool it is that you can actually get out there on YouTube, talk to people, get some feedback, and do what we do on here. And I was like, that's enough reason, nothing big. So I made a little chamomile tea with lavender in it and a drop of honey. There's no caffeine in this. It's actually to chill you out. The new wife introduced me to this, and looking around the house and stuff like that, I'm like, wow. You know what I mean? Like, wow, what have we done in this house and stuff since we got married? It's real creative around here. I got some stuff I will show here from the week and stuff, some material things, but been getting back into the art and having an ounce of regret of life and responsibilities, and probably about 30%, 33.3% laziness for getting out of it for a while. And I've been playing around with these Copic markers. I've been playing around with the gouache. I've been playing around, I love ink wash, what we're doing with ink and stuff, but got these Copic markers that are just gray tones because they were on sale. And I was like, let's check out what these are. And they're just different tones of gray. Yes, Rob Ripa is there. I'm actually going to bring up something here in a little bit. Seems like an ongoing thought that you put in my head there, right? But anyway, with these Copic markers and stuff, I love them. They speak to me. This is the first piece of work I've ever done on this. I took an old picture of David Bowie I found on the internet, and played around with it, and I can see like 2 mistakes in it. Usually I tear my art apart, but I'm like, that actually came out looking all right. And then we had the wife in this house. You go through this house, and I couldn't ask for anything more. You go through here, it's just waves of like creativity. And I mean, I know it's comic book and pop art and all that stuff that they're here and stuff like that. But she has gotten a Cricut, and she is making tumblers, and she's getting into the process and stuff. She has her own little groups and stuff. So we've had these cool glasses she's been making. I've got things I could show them there that are Halloween themed, making coasters, playing around. So it's sort of like I couldn't ask for anything more to be surrounded by all this stuff. You hear my accent, which I always thought was sort of a contradiction to some of the things I talk about. And one thing's being in an art environment, if you will, right? And it's it's for just the love of doing something. No real pressure and stuff. I'm gonna put her stuff over there because that's all I need is to like blow her shit up. But with this chamomile tea with lavender and a drop of honey in it and stuff, that's to chill you out. It actually does chill you out and help you relax if you've had a stressful week and stuff or whatever. I've also been listening to this ambient jazz that you find in like would fit into film noir videos. And I actually was going to mention Rob Ripa, who's one of the 3 people watching right now. But he kind of put out the fact that Blade Runner is considered cyberpunk, and I finally figured out why it made smoke come out of my ears, and my brain short circuited, and I really started thinking about this. When considering what I thought what cyberpunk was. I think Johnny Mnemonic and stuff, fast paced stuff, but it's the freaking soundtrack with Blade Runner. It's a film noir feel. They have a song called Blade Runner Blues. I'm like, The soundtrack actually comes off of like very much like film noir stuff for a sci-fi movie, and I can't believe that I'm probably going on 2 months, and this still has been on my mind. But it's the soundtrack. I've actually used the soundtrack and listened to the soundtrack just to kind of relax and stuff. It's just fantastic. I actually have a video where somebody has a vinyl. I think it's a green vinyl where they do that. So here we are in 2020, and I always refer back just to kind of give new viewers and stuff, and just a reminder out there and stuff back how long I've been into this stuff since I was like 4 in the late 70s and stuff. But it never ceases to amaze me that I will buy stupid stuff sometimes on an impulse. Hey, what's going on? All kinds of people coming in, but I will buy all kinds of stupid stuff that I will admit that like sometimes I am too old to buy and stuff. And it's always impulse buys, or it's something that's not, it's cheap, or it's on sale, or they're like what I did today. It's like 3 or 4 things. Yeah, Rob Rip, I love the soundtrack. Vangelis is amazing. Yes, and I probably butchered his name, but it just amazes me how I have a picture that I put on Facebook before just to kind of show people about movies rehashing. It's a joke, right? But it's a marquee for a theater that has 4 movies on it, and you can look at those 4 movies and you don't know what year it is because everything comes back around and gets rehashed or remade and things like that. And I remember growing up, and my toys went from Shogun Warriors to dollar store toys, puzzles, little shoot 'em up cap guns, to G.I. Joe and He-Man. He-Man first, Masters of the Universe. That was the stuff in G.I. Joe, superpower figures. It was in the house. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you one of the few things I can say is that there for a while in the late 70s, early 80s, from probably like 77 to 82, Christmas was happening in my house. I mean, it was very fruitful. Okay. You know what I mean? I got some good stuff. It was after that things kind of went downhill and stuff, right? For reasons beyond control of people, right? But it just amazes me that in the early 2000s, I was sitting there with my son doing his Christmas when he was young, probably like 4 or 5 years old. And I had to stand up because it was Transformers and Masters of the Universe toys and some G.I. Joe. Everything had come back around. So it just never ceases to amaze me. I got left them up there. It never ceases to amaze me that here we are 20 years later, and I'm still buying the same stuff. They had these new He-Man Masters of the Universe toys out there, and I looked at them, and they the figures that they're making, it's obvious that you won't confuse them with the toys from the 80s, right? But they came up with these little Castle Grayskull thing, mini mates, I think it's what they're called. Eternia minis, if you will. And you open the Castle Grayskull up and you'll have a little miniature figure in there, but you don't know who you will be getting. And yes, there is a chase figure out there. I could care less because I bought this on a whim while we were just shopping around Walmart, and lo and behold, I hit the mother load as far as I'm concerned and got the Skeletor. Yeah, I'm done with them. And that's what I mean. I'm like, oh man, I don't need this, but that is cool. And then we go through the VHS and stuff. When I was growing up, one of the things that was very cool is a lot of this stuff. I'll be reading some comments in a minute. A lot of this stuff, it was cool to, the rich kids got the Transformer toys, kids in my lane, you'd get a GoBot, maybe a Return of the Jedi figure if you were lucky, stuff like that, right? But as you grew up, you got a little bit older, there was a thing where there would be some judgment for being into these things. We've talked about all that before, and probably some people are experiencing it now, and everything like that. But you just reach a point you don't care. You like what you like, and you stick with it. And one of the greatest things that happened as I got older and I was doing these things, I was into comics and we were doing our own thing. We played outside a whole lot, had our little adventures, sneak off to the movies or walk down to the movie theater on a Sunday or something. And it was great. And then all of a sudden we got cable in my town, proper cable, not that little square box that had 3 buttons where, you would unscramble an HBO or a Showtime channel and stuff. But we got proper cable. And I had been in other towns with family. Like it'd be like 30 minutes down the road, and I couldn't understand how they would have cable and I'd get a taste of Nickelodeon. I'd get a little taste of MTV, or somebody would show up saying that they had a cousin come down from up north, like New York or something, and they would have a VHS tape, and we would sit there and watch MTV. I would stay up as much best I could at 9, 10 years old. I would stay up to watch. I just forgot what it was. It was on TBS Friday Night Flicks, Friday Night Videos, or you'd have a PBS show where it was they would show actual videos like 99 Left Balloons by Nina and stuff like that, and they would have the lyrics underneath it, so it would be educational and you could see it. So growing up and having all this stuff in moderation and it feeling new, it just made things really exciting and cool. It was supplemental. It wasn't the center of everything that was making everything cool growing up, like in this little golden age. But it was like a little here and a little there, and things were cool. But you just got older, people kind of looked at it. There was still that mindset. And I know it's still out there. But one of the things on Nickelodeon I absolutely loved was Danger Mouse. Now, as a guy who would watch these English shows on PBS, and like Monty Python. I'm trying to think of the one about the brothers. The opening sequence had 3 guys on one bicycle and floating around. It was a comedy show. But anyways, late 70s, the stepdad watched these. I was right on it with Monty Python and stuff. We're starting to rent videos in the early 80s and stuff. But Danger Mouse came from England, so I still have the VHS tapes, right? And it was followed with Bananamon, and then you had Count Duckula pop in there. And there's no telling in 1985-ish how you didn't know how old these cartoons were. You didn't care. You didn't understand. And then you had the Renaissance in like 1990, where maybe 91, where you had Rugrats, Salute Your Shorts, and Ren and Stimpy, the icons, if you will. Much respect. So to finish off the Danger Mouse, and I'll go through the stuff here. I ended up getting this at Ollie's today because it was on sale and they only had 2 left. As I was buying this, I'm looking at this like, why am I doing this? It was like something else was controlling my body. My brain is sitting here going, what are you doing? And I'm doing it. I'm buying this. And the biggest thing is that it comes with an exclusive Danger Mouse figure, if you will. Pinfold, Danger Mouse, Toad, Greenback, and all of them, and his henchman, the Crow, whatever his name was, and all that stuff. Absolutely loved those cartoons growing up. So here I am doing that. One of the things I was going to get down there is that the Blue Falcon is out there being talked about, right? There's a Scoob movie, right? And they got the Blue Falcon and Dynamite in it. And let me just go and grab it. Right. I bought this a few weeks ago and showed it, but I didn't really think too much about it because they were very smart. If you watch the Blue Falcon when you were a kid, he was with Dynamite. All right. They were a team. So they split these sets up, 2 figures per. But they don't give you the actual team and stuff. Well, Muttley is in there, and it doesn't really matter because I started digging through my VHS tapes and I have Dastardly and Muttley, So they really, gave me exactly what I needed. They have one of Captain Caveman, but he's got beads and stuff in his hair, and it just runs all over me. He looks like a surfer dude or something. I don't know what they're doing. So it just amazes me how this stuff just cycles back or never really disappears. And I think that's cool because it's in moderation over the years. I don't know. I highly doubt that's the plan, Let's look and see who's out there. Because like I said, I just did this stream tonight because we're alive, we're breathing. YouTube is a gift if you really think about it. It's been around for so long. We might have taken it for granted, but how else? What path in life would have us all here right now doing this? Rob Ripa is there, the man who put it in my head about Blade Runner being cyberpunk. And he's absolutely right. And it's still blowing my mind. Friar Tuck, beer makes me relax, right? Yeah, I have stories. Mr. Gretzky, great to see you. Friar Tuck, going back to what I was talking about there. I never got into Transformers or He-Man toys as a child. G.I. Joe, though, and Star Wars toys were my thing. Yeah, I got into a fight at 7 years old to get my Boba Fett back after I told his mom I wanted it back. Sleepy Reader's here. Sleepy Reader, actually did I held off on doing my show because when I got on here in my stream, Sleepy Reader was doing a live show with Chad's Attic. So go check that out. That was an interesting show. We got to talk about, they were, in the chat and everybody, they brought up Commandy, Jack Kirby and stuff. And, that's enough for me. For our tuck, I had a neighbor as a child that had an antenna that could pull in New York City TV stations at night. Absolutely. Same thing. We actually had I had a step grandpa, as wild as that sounds, but the man was a genius. Instead of putting the antenna outside on the roof, he just took the pole off the antenna and he got some kind of bearing or something, and maybe just a screw, and he just put it in the center of the center of the ceiling inside the house. So you could adjust, and he put a wire down, like one of those old UHF cables that go in the back of your TV. He just tied that around it, and you would just walk it around, spinning it around till everything came in. Man was a genius. I grew up in a town north of Albany, New York. That was obviously before cable days. Awesome. Danger Mouse was cool. Yes, he was. It was such a good cartoon, man. I have a Roku now. I got into the Roku about a year and a half ago, I think, and I absolutely loved it coming into the 21st century. I know Danger Mouse is somewhere on there in one of the streaming services. I knew someone with Prime Star Satellite. First time I've seen Cartoon Network with the 60s Fantastic Four and Hong Kong Phooey. I was living somewhere in 93. And Cartoon Network was fantastic. And I actually have a story where I may have had an opportunity to be at the ground floor level of working at Cartoon Network, but things did not work out in my favor. And that is a true story. That's not some bullshit story there to get attention, be like, ooh, right? So, another thing I got at Ollie's, just to get this out of the way, and this is what I'm talking about, impulse buying, right? I'm the guy who, my brother and I both had New Mutants number 98 off the rack back in 1990 because, Rob Liefeld was getting talked about a lot. He was on the spinner rack. My brother had it was wild. My brother, 4 years younger than me, just that extra amount of youth that he had his pulse on what was going to be new and hot. Even though we didn't worry about key issues and how much they were worth at this time and stuff, he would come down, spend a weekend with me. We'd go hit a few places within walking distance to get our comics. We never really bought the same comics. We'd get a stack of comics each, go in my room. I'd get on my bed. He'd get on the beanbag I had in there, and we would trade out the comics as we read them together. But New Mutants 98 was one of the ones we got, not because Deadpool was in it, but that was a god awful actual comic if you read it. And I'm that guy with other people probably my age that have let me know before that this whole thing about Deadpool exploding and becoming like, one of those characters, just blows our mind. I don't regret. I had a chance, I think in 2010 to get that New Mutants number 98 for $12 right in front of me. And I just didn't want to do it because I'd had the book. I had read the book before it was worth anything, and it was god awful. It was not a well-written nor drawn book, Anyway, but this was on sale. Ollie's was actually advertising this book of Deadpool, oversized hardback book, The Art of Deadpool. And there was a few covers I liked. And it amazed me how I've had 2 sets that I've gotten at auctions or little flea markets and stuff. I've had 2 sets of the complete series of Deadpool that came out in 97 maybe, and I sold them on eBay a couple years ago. But there was a few odds and ends that came out where I really liked them. But I get this is a Mad Max cover. This is this is Mad Max, the Road Warrior, and that was just enough to push me to get this. Now, I've gone through it. If you're a Deadpool fan, you're going to like this. There's some commentary in there. It's not just a poster book that goes through there. And I really haven't really read it, but I went through and looked at them, and it really amazed me as somebody who's not really impressed with Deadpool, how many of those books I've actually had over the years and just flipped and turned over. Here we go. Sleepy Reader, I never believed Deadpool was here to stay. I still have trouble believing it. Yeah, I mean, and it simply, for me, it comes from seeing Deadpool in that New Mutants 98. I think we knew that New Mutants was going to end at 100 and we are going to get a big number 1. Now, this is when Jim Lee and Chris Claremont gave us an X-Men number 1, and it set records. And then I think X-Force number 1 came in. They canceled the New Mutants at 100. In comes X-Force bagged with a little trading card in it. And it set records also. And I hung in there probably like the first 6 or 7 issues of it because it crossed over with Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man number 1 at the time. I mean, it's still fun, man. I mean, even though it was the start of the 90s and stuff, it felt like the 80s went out with a bang, if that makes any sense, you know. But seeing Deadpool and his origins and seeing him coming up, you're just shaking your head like, what kind of zeitgeist is going on out there? How's this happening? Again, people, chamomile tea with lavender and a little bit of honey. I don't know if there's any tea, no caffeine. I don't know if there's any tea drinkers in there, but this chills you out. All right. I'm sitting here like distracted over the David Bowie pick I've done with I can't believe that came out that well. All right. And then we have Friar Tuck here. What we got here? I was a young adult, early 20s, when I got back into comics, and was anti-Marvel, unfortunately, other than the Punisher for whatever reason. I think we've all had our reasons for just getting kind of sick of a company at some point in time. I've always said that one of the things I would really like to, just get a poster board is to go through the many stages of being a collector. Because I believe there is. I think there are actual stages that we as human beings have with our brains and stuff, that whenever you're in, and I don't think it's just with comics, but there's times I have looked at all of this and I've just been sick of all of it. Like, what have I done? What have I done? And that's all I can say to myself. I just look around like, how does this happen? All the books I've gotten rid of over the years, all the ones I've accumulated over the years. And there's been days I just looked at it and I could just throw it all outside. And then there's times I just walk through and I think how lucky I am. I think of how lucky I am to have had something that I found so young that I loved and have been able to, I kind of track my life with some of this sometimes, meet people. And I've done the videos where I've talked about all the places it took me, just playing around, all the places that I found when I went to, if I ended up in another town and stuff, or a city or something, hey, let's see if we can find some comics. And you end up in neighborhoods and finding restaurants. And it's like a blasting cap. It's not the whole bomb, but this is the blasting cap of having that nose for trying to find the comics and stuff. And then you've ended up exploring places and stuff. I can go on and on and on, that'll be an hour video if I'm not careful. Friar Tuck again. Valiant and DC Valiant and DC were what drew me back in. I tell you what, man, those Valiant years, especially the Jim Shooter year and stuff, gold. It was gold. That was so much fun. Oh man, it seemed like the sky was the limit there for a while. Now, one of the things that I've gotten, and I'm not going to try to review this book again, right? This book that I'm going to show actually gets me, I wouldn't say it gets me emotional, but it definitely will stir a few things in you, right? I just lost somebody here. I want to show this book here, right? But anyway, it'll stir a few things up, right? Imagine a fish tank, clear water, everything's settled, and then somebody comes and shakes it, and all that old food and all that accumulation of debris, if you will, dirties up the water, gets you thinking. And that's why I considered this a piece of work. I can't really consider, I hate having to refer to this as a comic book, if that makes, if that makes any sense. And then again, it also may have been the right time in my life at a young age that I found this and read this, and it's on top of that. I'm one of those people, it's not just I love something, I want to know why sometimes. I don't like the mystery. But the first thing that I have is that I've had this for 26 years now, right? And I found out this is out of print, and I'm surprised it's not worth more, right? And the reason it's beat up is I wanted to share. This was a time that I wanted to share and get people into things like comics and this, kind of show them that's what's not going on. I think I was doing a semester at a community college at this point, I think I was coming out, had the GI Bill going on, I already had a job and things like that. Actually, I think I had 2 jobs at this time, but anyway, the picture was coming out, and this was the year of not only of the Crow, but of Sheryl Crow and the Counting Crows. That's how I can remember some of the early 90s, is that, my God, everything seems to be Crow here lately, right? And I've read this, and I believe in advertisements, if you were lucky enough in pre-internet days, but this may have been the very first image put out of Eric Draven, The Crow by James O'Barr. And every time I've tried to do some kind of review of this book and stuff, I get all melancholy or something. It's really, that's why I think it's just a piece of work. A man has a great loss in his life, and this ends up being a cathartic story. And I met James O'Barr in 2010. I'm so glad he put the year that I met him. I'm not going to lie, he was a nice guy, freaked me out to the point that I just reached a point where I wanted to back away slowly because it was a little bit overwhelming. And when I turned around, there's Jim Starlin with No Line at this time at his table. And what went through my head is Jim Starlin's an old, an old hippie from the 70s, psychedelic stuff that it was just too much to turn around and go from O'Barr than to see the legend Jim Starlin. And I was like, okay, I got to go. I mean, it was funny. It was very funny. I had a moment, but I went ahead and I got this, right? I haven't been buying a lot of comics over the last couple of years. This came out in 2011. And then I think they had the first special edition, I think, came out in 2011. This is the one from 2017. I missed it the first time around. I'm like, I'm not going to miss it a second time around. And I watched this sort of disappear from a Books A Million up the road and stuff. So I went ahead and just ordered this. But I think this has 30 extra pages in it. And James O'Barr talks about how those 30 extra pages were done with pen and ink like he did them back in the 80s and early 90s. No computer. He had a few opinions on a few things that I could read in this, revisit. And it was for pacing and a few things that were in there. And some of the extra pages are gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. So pacing issues, stuff that wouldn't fit in the comic back in the day. He admits there was things he didn't know what he was doing. And here we are years later. He has experience now, and he wanted to do a few things later. But this is an absolutely gorgeous edition. I've already started reading it, going through it. And it's just fantastic. I consider this with the poetry in it. It's amazing. This thing got popular in the 90s, yet it's heavily influenced by by the alternative music of the 80s. So this is actually a guy who was influenced by Joy Division, The Cure, all those melancholy bands, maybe the Smiths. I don't know. Who knows what James O'Barr was listening to very sad music back then, while he was working on this. And that music permeated him and came out in his pencil with some of the stuff that he did with The Crow. So it amazed me that a character that was shaped and molded by the alternative music of the 80s became an icon of the 90s. And let's face it, the death of Brandon Lee both made that movie a hit and doomed the rest of the franchise, because you can't replace Brandon Lee, in my opinion. Good efforts on everyone's part, if you will. All right, see what's going on out here. Bowie has white hair at some point. I wonder if that's the Thin Duke. What was it? The White Thin Duke back in the day. I know he put a little. He couldn't get rid of that the little bit of the red orange Iggy Stardust stuff there for a while. the Thin Duke. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm messing this up. All right, I relate to that. Both sides of the coin. Twice I got rid of almost everything, and twice ended up recollecting most of it. Yeah, you just reach a point where you're sick of it, and you're like, I'm a certain age, and I got responsibilities, and I got all this stuff, and we forget that we still have to take care of ourselves. The whole point of having a hobby is to take your mind off of the grind and the responsibility. You're allowed to relax, I do recommend a hobby that you use your hands or a physical activity more. Excuse me. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with this, as long as it's not interfering with other parts of your life, moderation, addiction, all that stuff, man. I had a very long week at work, and I'm a social worker, case manager kind of type guy. And I'm just sort of like, turn your head off, man, turn your head off. Okay. So, amazingly enough, if you were lucky enough in the 90s to open an account with eBay back when eBay was gold, I got the first 5 issues of Mr. Miracle by Jack Kirby from the 70s. I got all 5 issues, 2 or 3 different lots, different auctions to complete those first 5 issues. And back then, including the shipping, came to $5, if you can believe that, for everything. And try that today on eBay. But anyway, I got an email from eBay and stuff, and turned around, and I got a $25 coupon for some kind of 20th anniversary. And eBay's been around longer than that. So I got on there and I got a few things. So I have the complete Max cartoon, Sam Keith's Max, that came out in the 90s on MTV. I have that coming, but I also got these trading cards of the Little Shop of Horrors from 1986, complete with their stickers. There are things that came out during the 80s that a lot of people thought were weird, and you're just sitting there like, this is fantastic. I haven't had that feeling that I can think of since I watched Scott Pilgrim versus the World with some people, and I'm just sitting there like, this is the most majestic thing I've seen in the 2000s that I can think of. And we're getting close to Halloween, guys. So we're getting close to Halloween. And I don't know how Halloween's going to go this year, but Halloween is my favorite and has always been my favorite holiday. And I like digging out the old Universal horror, Universal monster series, Frankenstein, Wolfman, Bela Lugosi, Dracula, things like that. I love being on YouTube and finding the old Halloween specials that were on when I was a kid. Even cheesy movies like the Elvira, Mistress of the Dark movie from the 80s. A good slash, Freddy Krueger. I can go on and on and on, but there's a certain charm about some of the movies that came out exactly when they came out. And that would be something like The Lost Boys, another impulse buy, probably in the last 2 weeks. And it was cheap. Don't get me wrong. It was Walmart, Blu-ray and DVD. And I realized that the copy that I had, I have on DVD, it still has a name on it. Somebody had wrote their name on the back of it. I got it for $2 at a yard sale. So I get up there and I get the DVD, and I was watching some Lost Boys. Maybe I put that DVD in to go to sleep to or something. I don't know. But I got to the Lost Boys, and I'm like, this really holds up. Even with some of the 1987 cheesiness of it, that's in there, it brings a charm. It's part of that world. Kiefer Sutherland, his David, holds up. Everything about this movie still holds up. That's what's amazing. Even with some of the stuff that probably looks dated to a lot of people who were not old enough to be there or too young to actually remember the 80s and stuff. The 80s is not a character in the movie. That's why I think this holds up. The soundtrack holds up. The kids hold up. The vampires hold up. The concept holds up. It's just so good to see this. In other movies I've been watching a Grace Jones Forgotten movie that I say is the American Werewolf of London for vampire movies. Vamp. That's one of those movies where it's horror mixed with some dark comedy and stuff. I've been watching that one, Interview with the Vampire. There's just so much good stuff out there, and upgrading some of the stuff doesn't really bother me. And some of the things that I'm also looking around and getting, I don't understand the problem with getting physical media. That seems to be a thing with some people. CDs are still selling. Vinyl records have made a huge comeback. I mean, they've been back, but they made a huge comeback because supposedly this is the first year that they have outsold CDs, and CDs are still also selling. Of course, you got streaming and all that stuff. There's just many ways to get music. And it amazes me that it's still going on with bands not able to tour and all this stuff. And now Facebook is having to where if you're a live band, they're going to shut down your Facebook page or whatever if you try to make money live streaming your show on there. It's getting bad. So for them to have this music and stuff come out and still make it is just amazing to me. So seeing all this stuff still going on, being retroactive, I still have a VHS player. I've got 2 record players, one from 1986 that I looked up that I put my one I bought in the 1990s up just to have the nostalgia there. It's got double cassette players and stuff. Some of the stuff is just sort of fun to dabble in and play around with. And And if you have people come over, it does sort of become a bit of an icebreaker to get people talking off their phones. Like wow, But one of the things I've realized with this physical media and stuff is that it's now is the time to get these things because for whatever reason, maybe it's the streaming services picking up when it comes to movies, at least, and things like that. At least in my area, my part here, it seems like they're shrinking. Like the FYE store now has like these CDs have shrunk. It looks like the movie section is shrunk. They keep pulling out more and more little cardboard, I don't know, boxes, display cases to put 3 for $5, three for $5 or 3 for $10 movies, and moving the stuff. Maybe DVDs are dying now. I don't know. I know Blu-ray, it's an old technology. I know Blu-ray is supposed to be the way to go, but Blu-rays have been around for quite a while also, and you can still buy DVDs. But I went back and they did me right. The first thing I bought used was the second Aliens, which I have on VHS, but which amazed me, and Predator 2, which I also still have on VHS, right? And I'm like, man, I gotta live in the now a little bit. So I feel like I'm in the 2000s now getting this stuff, right? But of course, when I got home, there was only one movie. It was just Predator 2 in there. So they did me right. I went in and they more or less did whatever they had to do with the cash register and on their computer. And I got the special edition of Aliens for free. So they did me right, which is all right. But it just amazes me that no matter, like I was saying at the beginning of this, everything seems to come around. G.I. Joe, He-Man, Danger Mouse, Hanna-Barbera characters, Scooby-Doo, all this stuff. It just keeps coming around. And it's amazing that Aliens, one of the few movies that broke the rules, the sequel is considered by a lot of people better than the original. It's still just considered a classic. These movies still hold up. That's what I find amazing, is how movies from 35 years ago, 33 years ago, or whatever still hold up. Now, with that said, Predator 2 came out in 1992 and it's set in 1997. This really feels like a B movie. It just amazes me how the second Predator didn't really seem to stand the time, yet the sequel to Aliens did. I think that's fantastic. Now, I also want to point out what I've heard is that where Walt Disney, the Disney company, has bought up Fox, and they're getting a lot of their stuff, movie franchises, such and such, la, la, la. What I've heard, and I don't know if it's from panic, and I don't know what's from fact, but we're all friends here, so I'll put it out there. But if you have any franchises like this that you don't already have, you might want to grab it, because Disney is really supposedly wanting to pick up on their streaming service, and they're going to start limiting releases or get rid of them altogether of certain franchises they own now. All right. So if physical media and having that stuff is important to you, if you live in an area where you get 0 snowstorms, 0 rain, 0 lightning storms, 0 thunderstorms, you're free of any kind of natural little disaster that can happen to where your internet is knocked out. Sure, don't worry about it. What we got here? Rob Ripa. The Max cartoon, loved it. I forgot about Liquid Television. Thanks for reminding me. Yes, no problem, man. Liquid Television, for everyone that doesn't realize, is right before MTV took the dive. They were, MTV, if you guys remember, it was really all about music. You had music news, you had VJs, you had 24 hours by the time we got it of music videos and shows like 120 minutes and MTV Raps, Headbangers Ball. And then in the 90s, they had MTV2, and the regular MTV started adding a little more shows. You had Beavis and Butthead. Maybe that started. If I really sat here and thought about it, go down memory lane. But they started having like The Real World, and they started having Beavis and Butthead. But before Beavis and Butthead and stuff, they had a show called Liquid Television. That's where it came from. Liquid Television was 30 minutes. And I think it played back and back with the half-hour Comedy Hour, one of the first places I saw Drew Carey and a few comedians ended up making it big. But they had a half-hour comedy hour, which was hilarious. VH1 popped up, and they ended up having like a little comedy half-hour comedy show also. But in the midst of all this, you had this really cool show, and there's been 2 or 3 versions of it. And now we're talking about volume 1, if you will, of Liquid Television. And it was a combination of cartoons, little cartoon shorts that they would pull from other countries or however they got it. Because you started discovering that there was an MTV Korea, an MTV London, an MTV, whatever, the world was getting smaller, and you were starting to learn these things. You would hear them mention, or they would show clips from award shows, across the pond there and all this stuff. But anyway, but they had, all of a sudden, it was like I felt like I was watching a heavy metal magazine come to life with some of this stuff. There was it was just a series of just cartoons. Some people would send them in, and that's where Beavis and Butthead got its start, which led us to Hank Hill. And I'll think of that creator, Mike Judge. That was his name. That's pretty much where he got discovered, with a little 3-minute clip of Beavis and Butthead playing frog baseball. They had a little marionette show, kind of, called Winter Steel, where it was a biker chick who was tough as nail trying to track down Crow. There we are to the Crow. One more 90s of the Crow, Counting Crow, the Crows, Sheryl Crow, and now Crow on Liquid Television. She was tracking him down with an anthology series. And then you started having these little shorts. I think that's where we started seeing Max. And then we also had The Head, where a man ended up having a huge head, like a cone head, but it would open up and he had an alien living in there. It was very freaky. And those two, I think, ended up becoming the big cult hits, and along with Beavis and Butthead, and all got their own shows properly, if you will. Might be remembering that wrong, but I still have a few VHS tapes where I have on 2 or 3 VHS tapes the complete Max. They pretty much took the first 12 issues of Sam Keith's The Max, and whoever the animation team was, I don't know if they were using computers or what they were doing, but it looks, they took it right out of the book. It's a very faithful word for word adaptation almost. They replaced the Pit. If you've ever read The Max, the Pit showed up, Dale Keown's Pit. They replaced that with some shark dude. They had a lot of great stuff in there, and it gets heavy, and it's got that melancholy 90s. You know what I mean? Where everybody is sad and wearing flannel and listening to grunge and on heroin. It has some moments, it's very, the Max, and why can I not think of that girl's name? I've got it on my shelf. But anyway, the girl that the Max is in love with and protects and all this stuff, her Outback, she's a very tragic character, and it seeps through. And Mr. Gone's daughter is just, Neil Gaiman's Sandman and Death was too much for her to handle. They were lightweights in her eyes. Aeon Flux. Now I could go around the corner in the next room. I have Aeon Flux, the VHS that came out of that. We had the Aeon Flux movie with Charlize Theron, because that was the wife. She's a fan of that movie, but I also had the complete DVD set. They did somebody a couple years ago that had it, and they inspired me to go ahead and get on eBay and find mine, and I'm glad I did, because those also hold up. If you have not watched the original Aeon Flux shows, I would say, you might want to look them up. Because you watch them over and over, because they're a lot of them are silent, and you're just watching Aeon Flux die over and over. Meanwhile, all the choreography and the storytelling of what all the characters are doing comes together at the end. These are so well thought out with what they have. What else did I get here? Seems like I was going to show something else off, but we're just cruising along, being all smooth here and stuff, right? But that's really about it, man. I can reminisce about old cartoons and the 90s a little bit. I'm really surprised we haven't had a big 90s renaissance. I don't know if anybody's really interested in this, but everybody in the 80s, they missed the 60s. In the 70s, they missed the 50s. Sha Na Na started all that stuff at Woodstock, and you got Happy Days out of it and stuff, right? And then, you got the Monkees that came back on MTV, which was cool. And, you had a lot of like Eddie Brickell and the New Bohemians, and a lot of jokes. Randy, the hippie off of MTV, if you remember that stuff. And then in the 90s, the 70s came back. Beastie Boys predicted that with their video Hey Ladies. Crispin Glover on David Letterman, where he got banned on the show, kind of saw some of that coming. And then the 80s tried to come back, in the 70s a little bit. Early 2000s, it seems like everybody was inspired by trying to look like they were from Good Times at Ridgemont High, or whatever that movie was called, with Sean Penn as Spicoli. Go back and look at Stacey's Mom's Got It Going On, and Liz Fair. Sometimes I Think About You. There's a lot of videos that were like, are they trying to be like the early 80s? They had even had Queens of the Stone Age with a song, Little Sister, that looked like it could have came out right out of 1982, in my opinion, with the blue lights and the hair and all that stuff. But I'm really wondering if where's the 90s nostalgia at, guys? I know there's 90s Nickelodeon nostalgia out there for those cartoons like Rocko's Modern Life and stuff. I'm kind of wondering if that's going to come back. I know Friends, everybody gets upset every time Friends gets moved around or taken off Netflix and all that stuff. But a lot of people kind of say that the 90s sort of never came out of the shadow of being nothing more but the 80s younger brother. Let me assure you, people who were there or not there, and maybe the people who are there will agree or don't agree with me. By 1989, you wanted the 80s to die. I mean, you did. I mean, the party was over. It was over. You had bands. It got the hair bands and stuff. A lot of the stuff got so derivative and incestuous, and I do say incestuous, that you went from having a band like Motley Crue, if you're a fan of that stuff, all that stuff, to by the end of it you had a band called Danger Danger that had songs called Naughty Naughty. Their gimmick was they had blonde hair, and every song they had was the same word being said twice. You're just like, you were just ready for the next thing to hit. And the 90s was very confusing for a lot of people at first. So don't let anybody fool you acting like they had their pulse on what was going on back then. It took a little while. There was definitely a culture shock, if you will, for a lot of people. All right, guys. So basically, something I'm probably going to go ahead and relax a little bit, chill out. I might read here a little bit tonight. I shared these a few weeks ago. I have what I think, I keep meaning to look these up, what I think are some of the first trades Marvel put out. Here's the issue 340 to 346 of the tail end of the Todd McFarlane run with Peter David. Ground Zero, is that what this is? Yeah, Ground Zero. I'm really excited to hear that. These books are a little bit oversized compared to a comic, and they look really well. Someone has warned me that early Marvel trades, they would take out pages if they were subplot, to take them out. And then I also have, and I have these issues, but it's so cool to have this. I think this is from 89 or something. But this is Fantastic Four, the Trial of Galactus that John Byrne had done. I love this story, but it's been years since I've read it. I have a whole box of Fantastic Four, and I think I finally got almost all the Byrne issues, I think. But what's really cool about this is that when John Byrne jumped from Fantastic Four to do Superman for DC, you kind of got wind that he may be coming back to Marvel, if you read into it, because they had a book called What The. What The was a humor book by Marvel. And in the first, I think it was the second issue. In the second issue, I'll refuse to dig it out, but you had John Byrne come on there, and you had Superman versus Fantastic Four, basically is what it is as a humor book. So there you are. You had the guy who was actually on Superman at the time doing a little funny 7 or 8 page crossover there, being very funny. Little did we know that he would jump on the Star brand, and then he would come over and he would want B characters, because he was on the flagship book at DC for so long that he ended up getting West Coast Avengers, changed it to Avengers West Coast, She-Hulk, and Namor. And you can say what you want about the quality of some of those books. I think his West Coast Avengers was outstanding. I think his Namor may have lost a little steam there towards the end, but it was some really great stuff there in the first year or two. And then She-Hulk, maybe the Sensational She-Hulk book, maybe some of the greatest work he did in the early 90s, in my opinion. He did the first, I don't know, 7 issues, had problems with creative editorial or something. And then he came back. They gave the book back to him about a year and a half later, and he ended up doing 19 fantastic issues. Here we go. Oh, Friar Tuck, Pearl Jam, and Alice in Chains. Funny about Alice in Chains that you're talking about there. I was there. I got to see 1201 on a midnight, and I believe it was Headbangers Ball. Had to have been. Well, why else would I be watching that 1201? Because I had just discovered Mystery Science Theater. So I was getting to be the night owl that I had inside of me at this time. But Alice in Chains came out, and I saw Man in the Box. And my first thought is thank goodness this is going to blow Warrant out of the water. That's what went through my head. I didn't really become a fan. I became a fan with their second song that nobody talks about. And Lane Stanley made them do another video. They shot a video, made another video because he did not like the first one. And it's called Sea of Sorrow. When I heard Sea of Sorrow, I went, this is real. This is the stuff. So I was an Alice in Chains guy. I had Pearl Jam 10. I was listening. You got to understand, I was listening to Black Sabbath and Jimi Hendrix around this time. I had just in the late 80s had people give me cassettes of it was get me out of the hair bands, if you will. I was listening to Bang Tango, Violent Femmes, The Smiths, and I know there's somebody else I'm forgetting. A couple bands. I was starting to see some of this alternative music. Lush, I think it was a band called Lush before it was called Shoegazing. I was listening to that kind of stuff, right? Coming around to The Cure. The Cure had Just Like Heaven, which I thought was an absolutely beautiful song. But I was coming out of that. And then, but yeah, I went retro there. And it was all Black Sabbath and Jimi Hendrix there for at least a summer. Anyway, but there's a bunch of little bands, I'm sure. Oh, wait a minute. I nearly lost you there. Screaming Trees. I thought they were the stuff. The Screaming Trees. I had their cassette, and I was also listening to Octung Baby by U2. Good times. I'm remembering all this music now and stuff. And of course, you had your Guns N' Roses, Use Your Illusion 1 and 2. You know, everybody had that. And Metallica Black. The freaking Peter Frampton record of Metallica, where everybody has it, Peter Frampton Live. It's in everybody's collection at the time. Okay. Oh, we got some people remembering the 90s. Some good stuff, in my opinion, came out in the 90s music-wise. Kind of dark and depressing, but good. I still have the cassettes. They're right here. If I turn the camera in, I can show you right there. I still have Temple of the Dog for Andy Wood. Mother Love Bone. I saw Stardog Champion in like 1990 and was like, what was that? That was fantastic. But Temple of the Dog is probably my favorite album that came out in the early 90s that I can think of. I mean, it pushes Octung Baby out of the way. The 90s music. Oh, yeah, I got a story here. The 90s music was depressing because it knew it would never be as good as the 80s. Little brother syndrome, maybe. But I knew this is one of the things that made me really decide to go into the military, because I'd already grown up and I'd seen some stuff. It was very odd. It was like I was mature about a lot of stuff, but if it came to emotional stuff, I was probably not. You know what I mean? Which is probably one of the reasons why I didn't end up knocking somebody up at 18 or 19 or being in a real relationship and stuff. Plus, I'd spent 9 months hitchhiking around. Those are stories for other days. But I ended up coming back home, and I got into town, and I thought we were going to do what we did like in high school. Like I'm probably like 20 at this time. But I know it was a summer night because we were out, but a bunch of us ended up in a back road. I knew one guy and he had some new friends, and they were alternative all of a sudden. You know what I'm saying? The guy who used to be in bands with me where we would do Paranoid by Black Sabbath was now he had shaved his head and he wears pink shirts with sleeves cut off, and it's very strange. But anyway, so we go out and we're with our new friends, and we ended up on a back road, and I'm like, what are we doing here? You know, I'm like, this is weird. Everybody's just driving around. It's like 2 a.m. We're on a dirt road. I get out. The moon is bright. And I'm like looking around like I'm bored to death. What the hell's with it? What are we doing? So I go back, and Chris and two of the guys were sitting there, and they just made the circle, and they had their hair in their face. They had that Kurt Cobain cut, kind of like a bowl cut with some shaved underneath. And they were just sitting there, and they were singing, what was the song? The one about it being an idiot, the Nirvana song about I'm dumb. I think I'm dumb. I think I'm dumb. Whatever year that song came out, that's where I was, and that may have been the moment I decided I got to get the hell out of here and do something. I came back home, and I'm like, I'm out here hanging out with people singing I think I'm dumb, in front of me in like a little sorry circle, and I'm like, oh my God. Burns' West Coast Avengers run is good, but I really hated how he destroyed years of character development for the Vision. It bothered me what he did with the Vision. What he was trying to do, I thought, when I was reading it at that age, if I'm remembering back, was he was just taking the Vision and trying to actually make him a Vision, trying to make him into like an actual ghost. He played really well with the android part. But I could totally get it. And when there's a lot of stuff he really did where it actually felt like in old Avengers. Felt like it really felt like you could skip over the Steve Englehart and Al Milgrom stuff, which in my opinion wasn't really that good. They might have had an issue or two in there where I'm sure they did something. And John Byrne came on, and I felt like he was picking up with the Avengers in 1979. You know what I mean? 90s was a good time for night owls. Remember USA Up All Night with Duckman? Up All Night with Rhonda, whatever her name was. And Duckman. Still can't believe Frank Zappa did the music for that show. Yeah, Duckman had George Costanza doing the voice of Duckman. And it went to some dark places to where you finally felt bad for Duckman, who was pretty much nasty to everybody. I think he was a detective. I loved his little pig sidekick because it was like Joe Friday, just a fax man. He was just all serious. And then it seems like he had two secretaries that were like these fuzzy little bears that were like, should have been on a kid's show that always got burnt by the radiator or something, right? I never quite got to the show, if you get what I'm saying, but I caught myself watching a lot, and it had a comic book. But I'm sure I've actually tried to find Duckman since I've had that Roku to see if anybody's showing it. I would love to go back and revisit that. I mean, come on, man. It was the era of 90210. We had to have something. Rhonda Shear. There we go. Rhonda Shear. Who is that? Detective 29. Here we go. And then Al Milgrom was a much better editor than artist, Con Sooth. Al Milgrom is somebody that I really hate to criticize, but I mean, we can look at his work. There's some stuff that he inked that was fantastic. It actually seems like in the 70s, I saw some stuff he penciled that was actually pretty good. But to me, Al Milgrom comes off the fact that he survived and was dependable. And if you really looked at his bibliography and saw the stuff that he penciled, plotted, inked, whatever, cover artist, whatever, the guy came off like a workhorse. You get what I'm saying? Like, the guy was he comes off, I don't know what he's like in real life, but he came off so dedicated and came through with so much stuff that you hate to say anything. The guy seemed to have had a passion for it. It's like it's like whatever limitations his talents had, he didn't let stop him. He kept going. And I think he went to high school with Jim Starlin. So those two kind of broke in together, I think, if that's a true story. Gilbert Gottfried was the guy in USA Up All Night. I remember watching a USA Up All Night, and I think I was in the military, so it was pure luck that I got to watch TV at this point. And the Ramones were on there riding a tour bus or on top of a bus in New York or something. I was just sort of like, oh, wow, it's the Ramones. Al Milgrom was a really good inker for Jim Starlin. Yeah. I totally agree. That's what I mean. There's stuff you really got to dig for his best stuff, but but then once you start digging, you start realizing how much there is out there. It's kind of like you had Giffen and you had Milgrom, and one became a little bit more successful than the other, if you will. All right, guys, we have been on here 58 minutes, 59 seconds, 59 minutes, even right there, man. I appreciate everybody that popped up. Thanks for just spending a little time on here. And it was kind of fun. Kind of fun just kind of hanging out and having a little chamomile tea with lavender and some honey and just chilling out, shooting the breeze. Have I ever tried sleepy time tea? Well, no, I haven't. I'm going to do this one comment here, and then we're going to call it a night here. I met Milgram, Detective 29, and he seemed to be that guy who's always the first guy to volunteer when something needs to be done. Milgram was a huge fan of the medium, just loved being there. And I'm so glad you're saying that, because that's what came through with his work. I would much rather read a comic by somebody who's not the best, but has a huge passion and cares about what he's doing, than some guy that's meticulously, spent 2 weeks writing a comic trying to be clever, to be a writer, So thanks a lot, Rob Ripper. Thanks, Rob Ripper. Thanks for the kind words. Friar Tuck, thanks for the kind words. Thanks for everybody that's popped up in here. And you guys, hope the rest of your weekend goes well. And remember, guys, let's be excellent to each other.